Hey everyone, welcome to Unique Ways with Thomas Gerard, an audio podcast. Got a really great guest on today. She's an evangelist of design ethnography and is dedicated to understanding how real people integrate products and services into their daily lives. She's the founder and principal of both Goto Media and Goto Research. Please join me in welcoming Kelly Goto. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Are you ready for 20 questions?
Sure, let's go for it.
Question one, tell me a little bit more about yourself. What do you do?
Well, you summarized it a little bit. I do run two research agencies, Gotomedia and Goto Research, but I think the biggest thing is I've been a communicator and an educator and evangelist for user-centered design for 25 years and counting. So some people say, that I helped found the user experience world, which I'll take because I'm that old. But I've been in the space in the field for many, many years, and I've worked on lots and lots of different projects, including UX strategy, moving into accessibility, and also usability testing integrated into the whole process.
Great. And just a quick note for the audience, if you guys are interested in related episodes, check out the recent episode with Liz Danzico. That was a great one. So question two, what's a key piece of knowledge that makes you different?
It's interesting. Let me just touch on the last comment you made is that I saw Liz 2 nights ago, and I've known Liz for a long time and definitely recommend her in all ways. But yeah, I've been in the field for a while. So a key piece of knowledge, I think that makes me different, and this happens a lot both in parenting and in running a business, is that I do have the ability to step into the other person's shoes and see things from a different perspective. So that comes into play as a core part, not only of who I am as a Japanese American, but also in this in-between space as I work between clients and agency work and also looking at the customer. So this ability that I have, I think it's helped me develop an empathy for how people experience the world, and it's really fueled the work that I do. And it's a large part of why I claim the topic or the title of design ethnographer, because I believe that you need to really step into other people's shoes and understand their lived experience in order to develop products and services for them that not only they're going to use, but they're going to love.
Great. Question three, why this of all things? Why do you do what you do?
I think from the beginning, I've been at the right place at the right time and I've seen maybe what doesn't work. And so in my world, marketing to people and trying to understand how to get ads and billboards and links in front of them, that really didn't work for me. I wanted to think more about how we could develop products and services and experiences that really help people not only engage in the world around them in a better way, but also allow them to do things that they might not normally be able to do. And that could be from the early days when I did kidscamp.com back in the late 1990s. It allowed people from all walks of life and experiences and abilities to engage in attending a camp, a virtual camp for the first time in many of their cases, and really leveling the playing field. And so I think whether I'm looking at experience or behavior or what motivates people, my diving into through research an understanding of what their real needs are and how to help reach those needs and what the emotional drivers are behind their behavior, that is what excites me, is solving for real needs.
Love that. Question four, some people struggle with. The question is, what does your future look like?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big question. I have been running an agency for 25 years. I love working with my team, but I also love continuing to think about, what the future has to hold. And so one of the things that's happened in the last few years for me is that I wrote a different kind of book, and it was really focused on storytelling. And it was a book called Seattle Samurai that took my dad's cartoons that he had drawn for 6 years and basically put it into a book format for the younger generation to consume. And while this doesn't seem directly aligned with the work that I've been doing, I realize that I have a passion for storytelling And for design, getting back to my design roots, designing and laying out the book, doing book talks, and mostly communicating not just with the generation that's passing, but being able to tell their stories and collect their stories and pass them on to the newest generation. And I really believe that thinking about storytelling and educating and communication and how to take these stories to another level so that they're truly communicating with this new generation, getting them off tech, getting them to understand their culture, their history, maybe a little bit more emphasis on what's important in life and thinking about things in that new way. I do think that's part of my future. So while I love agency life and I love tech and everything, that I've been able to experience, I love design. I love storytelling. I love multi-generational history, and I love doing work that has meaning, not just for me, but for other people.
Great. Five we say is unique to this show. The question is, let's talk about location. How does the notion of place play into what you do?
Well, I'll take you back. I guess, the house I'm sitting in right now is super important to me. So I grew up right outside of Seattle in an area called Mercer Island. It's an island. It's got bridges on both sides, so it's connected to Seattle and Bellevue. But this place is surrounded by nature. The house that I grew up in is an old wooden house. It's a cedar house, but it has this fantastic view of nature and the lake and the mountains, Mount Rainier and the Cascade Mountains. And there's this extreme feeling of peace and of place. And so being here is so grounding. I moved away for 35 years. I lived in different places in Chicago and LA, and then moved to the Bay Area. I've been traveling for years and years and years, lecturing, teaching for client work. And I think that my move back home, kind of a spawning home and understanding where place fits into my life, it really does impact the way I feel, the way I do my work, the way I am able to create peace around myself and for my children, and I guess for clients and for community around me. So, yeah, it's a really big thing, and I think having grounding is super important, both physically and emotionally, and looking at history and looking at the future. So grounding in place is extremely important.
Great. So number six, if you had to start from the beginning, what advice would you give your former younger self?
I found this article I had written it a while ago, but it was supposed to be a message to my former self. And I think it was called something like paying your dues. And I think the main point was that your dues were never paid, that you're always going to be continuously learning and growing. And a lot of it is through mistakes. And so I think that in that realm of thinking about what I would tell my younger self, and this was for AIGA, which was the design community at the time, I think that in the end, you have to make mistakes, and that the things that you go through in your life, I don't want to say they all happen for a reason. I mean, you don't want, or you want for your children especially, and you want to give advice about how to avoid certain things. I think it's through your mistakes that you really do learn. It's through situations that you grow as a person. You set your boundaries a little bit better the next time around. I think not waiting for permission all the time, speaking up is important. I do think when I mentor students, and I do a lot of guest lecturing for New York University and University of Washington, and I get in with classes and I love seeing what students are doing and how they're thinking. And I think the one thing that I try and tell them is that their voice matters and that they should speak up and not necessarily wait for other people to give them permission. One thing that I do is offer office hours, and I kind of have a calendar that I send out. And I say, hey, if you want to book time, you can book 15 minutes with me, and I'll always make time for you. And I love meeting with the students that actually take initiative and take that time. and put things in front of me to review or ask for little pieces of advice. If I can help someone and shape a direction or have them talk to me about a question they have about a career choice, I'm happy to give my opinion. But in the end, it's really that person's ability to speak for themselves and to experience life, and then make sure that they have people around them to support them along the way.
Great. So seven, what's a day in your life like?
Well, um, I would say that, that's a good question. No 2 days are really the same. I do have the standard waking up with the sun, trying to work out a little bit in the morning. Usually there's something to clean, all that stuff. Um, and I love the morning because it's my quiet time, and I give myself permission to pick up an actual physical book and read, maybe while I'm on the treadmill or something like that. But it's this quiet time that I love. Um, I do take my girls to school. They're in high school. And so we have driving and then, take the dog out. But really, no 2 days are the same. So I might be focused on agency work, checking my email. We're on Slack all the time. Or I might be trying to go heads down and be writing, doing podcasts, or working on material for an upcoming lecture. I think in the past, since through COVID, I was working on the side every waking moment on this other book that I was doing that was separate from work, the Seattle Samurai book I mentioned. A lot of my extra time, or any extra time, was spent working on getting that book finished, getting it published, getting it out, promoting it, doing all those things. Now that it's out, I'm really thinking about what's next and trying to carve out time, not just to think about the next 2 years, but also the next 5 years for where the company's going, what I personally want to do, what my next steps are. And so it's a really exciting time right now because I'm giving myself sort of space and grace to do the things that I really love. And for instance, last week I was speaking at an accessibility conference, and we were integrating AI into this process of coding and making apps using vibe coding tools and such. And it was amazing to spend 3 weeks just diving into new material and experimenting and riffing and iterating and working with the blind community to kind of think about new ways of using voice and technology to think about a new way of doing things like grocery shopping, or inventory, or kind of like taking day-to-day tasks and thinking about new ways to spin it so that it works better for the inclusive community. And so yeah, my day could be riffing on iteration, writing, just meeting with clients, doing podcasts like this, or maybe out walking my dog.
Great, I love that. Number eight, lifelong learning is a popular topic. How do you stay up to date?
Well, the podcast that you're doing is great. I think people sadly have a short attention span. I love that you have both long form and short form formats for people depending on their time and interest. So I will happily admit that podcasts and I mean, listening to books and audiobooks while I walk and do things definitely have kept me up to speed. I do miss kind of, there was a time where I had sort of a feed that was regular. Now I'm listening to NPR, I'm listening to news a lot. There's so much happening in news cycles. So I do try and keep myself up that way. But keeping myself up on technology, I usually always have a book to read that is sort of the latest and greatest book that might be out. Maybe one of my friends has written something. Friend of mine just wrote a chat GPT book, so I'm reading that. I'm also reading another biography that someone wrote about her parents that was also in the industry. And then I have always, maybe a novel or something that I'm reading. I just picked up a book. And you mentioned Liz Danzico, where she was actually moderating a book discussion a couple days ago. So I picked up that book by a colleague, Craig Maud, who is a photographer and writer um, in Japan. And so just continuously letting books and podcasts, and I love magazines. I love picking up magazines in the airport. I do miss that. I have not quite gotten into the digital magazine subscription because I love holding and reading and carrying magazines around and, potentially tearing out something that's important to me and saving it. So, I love that mix of analog and, you know, sort of looking at digital in those ways and continuously feeding my brain over time. So I don't know if I'm fully up to speed. I might go through different phases where I'm diving into different topics, like I was mentioning for AI and accessibility in the last few weeks. Or I might give myself, again, space and grace to look at something forward thinking and dive into art or music. So it really depends, but it's definitely a discipline to keep yourself up to speed.
Great. So 9 is about tools. Do you use both digital and analog tools?
Yes, yes. I want to say I'm not necessarily I think you mentioned like digital nomad. And so I I um I feel a little more rooted now, and maybe that's because I'm home and I'm surrounded by books. I grew up with books everywhere. We have a bookshelf that's 30 feet tall that you need to climb a ladder, and it's divided into all these different topics. And so I've been very involved in Japanese American history, and sadly, I wasn't fully educated on my own history and family history, even though my parents have been deeply involved for 50 years. So I feel like I'm re-grounding myself in physical books, like I mentioned. Um, but yeah, in terms of tools, are you talking about tools that I use at work?
It varies. Some people are mentioning design craft tools. Other people talk about tools for brainstorming.
Ah, okay. Well, I mean, work-wise, we are mixing around Figma and Miro and Slack and all that kind of thing. But in terms of physical tools that I use as a designer, I always have three notebooks with me. I am bizarrely obsessed with paper and lines and weight. And so I'm a calligrapher by trade and by background. And so I have probably 100 pens at any time, and then I'll carry around four or five with me. I have a real love for brush pens, but they have to be a certain type of brush pen. So I am constantly trying out pens from Jet Pen and ordering the assorted sets and then trying them out. And then usually I have to order them in bulk from Japan. Most of the pens I use are not available in the US. And so, the old me would go to Kinokuniya bookstore and really look at these different pens and gel pens and different type pens for writing. And then there's lettering, and then there's the notebooks that go with it. And so I'm also kind of I curate my own themes, and so I'll create different covers for these notebooks, and they come in different sizes depending on what I carry around. I do have a sort of journal that's ongoing, and I have my day-to-day notebook for scribbling down quick ideas where I don't care as much. And then I have my kind of diary that I get at the end of every year, and I start to fill out. And I have a little tiny digital printer that I carry around with me in a little Japanese panda case. And it has a tiny baby micro scissor in it so I can trim it out, and a 2-inch USB, micro USB to USB-C port for charging. And anyway, so I print these little stickers out and I put them in my notebooks. And I love crafting in that way. And also it helps me get my thoughts down. And yes, I keep things on my phone, but I love writing it down and having that analog experience. And I love washi tapes and papers and all of that. So I'm very much tied to my analog design background and that kind of not I don't want to say I'm a crafter because I'm definitely not a crafter like some people, but in terms of bullet journals and all that. But I do love calligraphy and the written word and putting it down on paper.
Great. Okay. So halfway number 10. How do you deal with work life or life work balance?
Okay, well, I mean, I'm still learning. I'm in my 50s now, and I think that the old me. was working 24/7, pulling 2 or 3 all-nighters a week. I don't believe I ever had a full vacation. When you have your own agency, you're always on call. When you're managing the business development of that agency, that deadline is always going to be the most important thing. So it was really difficult. I used to travel a lot for work, travel all over the world, went to South Korea always, went to Japan, went to Europe. So it was really hard. And I had the energy, so I thought it was okay. And then flash forward to having kids. And yes, I had full-time childcare for a long time, but I will say that moving back to the Seattle area with my girls and getting a dog. And I think that grounding question that you asked earlier is so important because we have what a friend of mine is calling a feisty Muppet for a dog. And she's a calming presence also. She just sits on top of me like this 25-pound weight, calming me down. And then we also live with my 86-year-old mom who's dynamic and a go-getter, and she's out more than I am. But I really had to confront what it was that I was doing and how I was balancing and my health. And I don't want to overuse the term ADHD, but I am the poster child for ADD and ADHD. Um, and so I'm always flitting all over the place or going into hyperfocus. And so we can talk about that. But I've also realized that I have a kind of dyslexia that affects a lot. And I think, getting older, I have more brain fog and all this kind of stuff. So I've had to become more direct and more intentional about how I spend my time. And then I mentioned writing a book. So the last 5 years, and I'm sure COVID, helped a lot. Moving back to this house helped a lot. I have been focusing on only work-life balance and doing that morning routine that I was talking about, where I have my own time and I do my own thing and I have those calm moments and walking with the dog. And I think having an agency for this many years, we have many relationships now that are built. I don't have to do as much outreach as I have in the past. I have a team that I trust. So, yeah, I'm kind of happily, I want to knock on wood, balancing a little bit better. And then, of course, there's sleep, which I'm getting for the first time. So I'm really working on it. And I do think I'm getting there. So I think I would say that the work-life balance for me is finally in my 50s, um, coming into its own.
Perfect. So if you weren't doing what you do now, what might you be doing?
You know, I recently, because of the book launch, had a chance to go into different environments that I haven't been to in a long time. So when I was younger, I made movies all the time. And when I was in college, I was radio, TV, film at Northwestern. And moving to UCLA, I continued in that vein before I went into the design world. And so my roots were in radio and TV and film. And so when I launched the book, I was able to go into our local NPR station, and working with those teams, I realized that if I could start again with a different career, I would definitely have been a radio producer. And I love NPR. I mean, I know you just talked to Liz and she was there, and it's just the most exquisite group of people that are not just smart, but they're quick and they're the best at what they do. And for instance, before I was interviewed, they asked someone who was Japanese to announce all the words and tape record all the Japanese words that they were going to be saying on air, just so that they knew how to pronounce them. And I've never done that. I don't know that I pronounce things properly in Japanese. And so the level of quality also I was super impressed with. Yeah, and so if I could do it again, I probably would go back and do radio and do production. And I had a stint where I did television production. I helped launch a few networks down in the LA area, and that's a whole different world and a different story. That was just frenetic. And this NPR world is paced in a way that I think is all quality. And so that level of media is something that I would have aspired to when I was younger. I don't know that I could do it today because the work pace and everything is just it really needs that young energy of people that are diving in. Not that you couldn't if as an older person, but yeah, I don't know if I could go back, but that's what I would do if I could do it all over again.
Great. Okay. And what would you not like to do with your career?
Hmm. Like you mean in terms of what I have done or just something I just really don't want to do?
Yeah, either, I guess.
Well, being the ADD, ADHD person I am, I need that kind of creativity and flexibility. And then I have to have purpose. So if I was doing something that was overly repetitive or maybe scripted, I think I would have a hard time with that. I would definitely have a hard time if I had to follow a rigid routine. um, I would I would lose interest. I used to say, and I have worked in the corporate environment. I would give myself 2 years where I would just deal with it. I'd get there in the morning at a certain time. I'd leave at a certain time. I would try not to bring my work home with me. I would try not to have a second job at night, and I would be able to play the corporate game maybe for 2 years, and that was it. And so I don't know that I could avoid it because my clients are corporate and I obviously there's big environments that I have worked in the past, but those are not my favorite environments because there's a lot of layers, there's a lot of politics. You can't necessarily get the work done that you want to do. So I just try and avoid those environments where I'm not able to think for myself, do my own thing, or make my own decisions. And I guess that's why a lot of us, and I say us in terms of business owners and small business owners, we want to be our own boss for a reason. So maybe we don't want to have to answer to other people I don't know, but I think owning my own business has allowed me to be creative and allowed me to be a thought leader in whatever I felt like doing. Hopefully all those things will continue to benefit not just the company and the clients that we work with and also our own thought leadership, but it's because I have this flexibility and ability to do whatever, you know, I think of at that time that I think has allowed us to exist for all these years. And I don't think I would be able to think the same way or do the same thing if I was locked into a corporate environment.
Great. Okay. 13. Do you have a favorite word, quote, or sentence?
There's a word, just gambate. It's Japanese and just means keep on going, keep on trucking. Um, it's something I guess that comes up a lot. My dad, there was a Japanese phrase um, that means fall down 7 times and stand up eight. It's about being resilient. And so I think there's a lot of quotes that we have that I grew up with, including the self-confidence formula. And, we have quotes all over the house. But the ones that I remember the most are, just kind of those proverbs that mean keep going, be resilient. Um, yeah, my dad said one thing that kind of cracks me up is he said, I think after the age of 25, you have to stop blaming your parents for your problems. And I take that to heart because I think people need to fend for themselves and take ownership over their lives at a pretty young age. And instead of blaming others or blaming their parents or blaming their environment, I think it's really good for people to take responsibility for their own lives and make it happen themselves.
Great. And do you have a least favorite word, quote, or sentence?
Hmm, that's the way it's always been done.
Mm.
So let's just do it the same way because it's always been done that way. Yeah, if I hear that, it's kind of an instant downer. Wah, wah, wah. I feel like there's no potential for growth. The mind is closed. There's very little I can do. So I might just handhold and agree and move on.
Great. And 15, you're choosing one word to describe yourself. What word do you choose?
Hmm. It's interesting. I always pick a word at the beginning of the year and I write it down in calligraphy in my book. And the word that keeps coming up for me that I keep trying to write down is authentic. And I'm just who I am. And I could rub people the wrong way. People love me. Um, I really am who I am. I'm a very authentic person. My work is that way. The way I run my business is that way. And that's what you're going to get. I am not always polished. I'm fourth generation Japanese. I don't even know how to speak Japanese. Um, my house is pretty messy. It's not pristine. I know people that have these houses that are just so put together. Anyone could come over at any point in time and it looks great. I am not one of those houses. I have projects going on, piles always of papers and projects and things that are happening. So I am very authentic. And I think it works in my favor because, I mean, you get what you get, and I work with people that can appreciate that. But yeah, I'll say authentic.
Great. And 16, what keeps you up at night?
Well, the last few days, my dog has been having trouble breathing, and so I've, she's been waking me up. Um, my older daughter always comes in also and wakes me up in the middle of the night. So between kids and dogs, I never, maybe at least in the last 17 years, haven't gotten a full night's sleep. But if I'm just laying there thinking about what needs to happen next, I'm always thinking about what I'm not doing. And I have kind of a mental list. There was a movie with Jessica, she was in Sex and the City. I can't remember her last name, but there's a visualization of what's happening in her brain. And it's exactly what was happening in my brain. There's lists of things that need to get done. There's all the ethical questions about life. There's maybe things that I wanted to buy that I didn't buy, um, grocery list, what I'm going to cook, and all that kind of stuff. And there's just like endless there. And then there's the ethical questions or the esoteric questions about what is happening with AI and technology and do I really want to try to continue to keep up? And I'm curious. And so the curiosity works in my favor because naturally I want to know what's happening and I want to have the latest and greatest and try things. And I'm curious and pretty passionate, but um, I do wonder how much I have to keep this pace in order to keep up versus maybe being okay not being up with the latest and greatest and not worrying about being left out of the conversation as we build the future. So, you know, um, I will say there's a lot going on in my head at night, and my aura ring will reflect my lack of sleep and my waking up constantly. But yeah, there's probably literally 1,000 things on my brain that will keep me up at night. And I do have these meditation. It's a technology actually where there are two USB-C charged speakers, and all they do is put out these pure tones. And it's 3 minutes long. You just push the buttons, and they both ring, one in the left, one in the right, and they resonate in these pure tones. And if I do that every day, it 100% grounds me, and I'm going to be doing it more. That's like a mantra and a goal I have because I just charged them again. I haven't used them for a few months, and I just used it this morning, and I realized, wow, I think that's going to help me sleep. So anyway, long answer to your question, but everything keeps me up at night, and I'm really working on it.
Nice. And final stretch here, number 17, what's a dream you're chasing?
Last week I was in Austin, and I worked, I'm going to say that again. My mom was coughing in the background. I don't know if you could hear her. But last week I was in Austin and I was working with my blind colleagues there, and I've been working on accessibility and inclusive design for over a decade now, maybe even 15 years. And in my dreams, and I say this carefully, and I'm not sure exactly how it pans out, but in my dreams, I get a grant or I'm able to work at a university level on research that is long lived and lasts not only for years, but is really meaningful and impactful. And I want to be able to do research to incorporate more accessibility into our daily lives so that all lived experiences can be accessed in so many different ways. So we think about multimodal experiences, we look at offline experiences, and online we look at products and services. But I also want to look at the lived space and universal design and how that all plays together. And so I want to be involved in some technology or some research that actually makes a difference for the next generation as they age and for people that have all abilities, all ages. And yeah, for definitely for blind and low vision, for deaf and hard of hearing, mobility and traumatic brain injuries, and all these things are really important to me so that we can figure out how to level the playing field a bit more and maybe simplify things. So I don't know how to shortcut that into doing something that's meaningful and doing something that has some impact that is likely research based. That's something that I'm chasing.
Great. And what inspires you?
I think people that live their life's purpose with clarity, people that have a really strong vision and they can't help but do what they do and they stay focused. I think in my life I've had too many different interests and I am striving for that clarity of purpose. And then people that are able to translate what they're doing into something that resonates to others. So something others can learn from. Um, the word authenticity comes into play, something that you can't fake. I love the work of Vivian Meyer, who took photos and they found these thousands of negatives after her death, and then just saw how brilliant she was. She couldn't help but doing what she did, and she did it kind of covertly as a nanny, but her life was focused, literally focused on these images that she was creating. Um, Alan Turing, did the Turing test. We've been looking at that for ages. Um, and he was creating a test to see when you couldn't tell the difference between chatting with a human and chatting with a bot. And we're finally getting there. And I just think that the vision that he had back in the day was so important. I mean, I love listening to good speakers and authors who have kind of passion, integrity. Obviously, Michelle Obama comes to mind as one of those people that lives her life with integrity. And I think that's the greatest thing that you could do. So that inspires me.
Great. And last couple here, number 19, advice. Any advice you'd like to share?
Well, being who you are, staying true to who you are in your work, in your relationships, in your micro interactions, as they say. Um, there was a quote that my dad had, and he wrote it in calligraphy on a piece of, like it was a paper lantern that hung above my bed when I was growing up. And it was about the wise old owl. And the wise old owl sat in the oak, and the more he saw, the less he spoke. The less he spoke, the more he heard. Why aren't we like that wise old bird? So I try so hard, and my hyper self loves to talk, But now I try and listen more than I speak. And I think that's so important is the art of listening. Um, Continuously growing and exposing yourself to new things. I don't think it happens to everyone naturally. I mean, I gravitate towards that and I'm always interested in new and different and learning. But I could take it to another level. I think being open to meeting people and having other opinions weigh in, having other perspectives weigh in is so important. I think right now in our nation, in our world, we're becoming so divided. I think the ability to bridge that with communication and to try and shift people's perspectives, I think that's so important. So being open to that and helping others be open, and the more doors that you'll find opening in front of you.
Great. And finally, number 20, how can our listeners keep tabs on you and what's our call to action?
Oh, well, I have a personal website, kellygoto.com. I blog on that infrequently. LinkedIn is probably the best way to connect with me, just Kelly Goto. There aren't very many of me, so that's easy. And then for my side interest, which is this Japanese history book that I have written and might be part of my future, it's seattlesamurai.com. There's an events page, and I'm speaking all over, and it's been really fun to reconnect with my Japanese community. Um, and then my company is gotomedia.com. So you can always find me there. My last name's Goto, and then you add the media or research after that. So go to media or go to research. So yeah, lots of different ways to see what I'm doing. LinkedIn probably is the easiest way to get a hold of me.
Great. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining. Liz Danzico suggested that I reach out to you, and I'm so glad I did. Great having you on today. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the conversation.